This episode of Radcast Outdoors is brought to you by PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings.
Fish on! Hey, Radcast is on.
Hunting, fishing, and everything in between. This is Radcast Outdoor. Here are David Merrill and Patrick Edwards.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Radcast Outdoors. I'm your host today, Patrick Edwards. And I just got to say, it's good to be back on the podcast. We've got an exciting show for you. I've got a special guest all the way from Pennsylvania via Zoom. I have Rebecca Boyd here on with me, and she is a lover of the outdoors, a gun enthusiast, loves her horses, loves to go riding. And so I'm very excited to have her talk a little bit about women in shooting sports, women shooting guns, the right to bear arms, some of those really cool things that we have in this country. And so, Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here and with all your listeners.
Yeah, it's really exciting to have you. I had actually heard you on another podcast, and I was like, well, I'm going to have her on mine so that she can have the Radcast experience. And so can you do just like a quick introduction, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into the questions?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up, born and raised in Northeast Pennsylvania. I grew up, my dad owned a lot of property and a Christmas tree farm. So I grew up in the outdoors all the time. I didn't get into shooting or firearm sports until I was in my 20s, but I had the love for the outdoors. So when I started shooting, it was part of that love for just being outside that drew me to that.
So in your 20s, what got you into shooting and shooting sports?
Yeah, a lot of people are surprised it wasn't hunting because I grew up with a dad who hunted a lot all throughout my childhood. Not that I didn't have the interest as I got older, because I did, but what first got me into firearms was more so wanting something for myself for home protection. And also, I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment, so that played a part too. I knew I wanted to get a firearm. So I started doing a lot of research, what would be best to start with, to learn with, and just kind of grow and go from there. So, and once I got my first firearm, I really found that I enjoyed shooting. And again, it was something that got me in the outdoors. So it was like two positive things, and it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, you had talked about it before that basically you wanted to live outside. I mean, as a kid, you wanted to do anything you could to be outside all the time. So as a little kid, what was Rebecca doing? I mean, what were you running around, playing in the trees, playing in the dirt? I mean, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, pretty much. My mom always said that, if I could sleep outside, that I would. She always had a hard time drawing me back in the house. If I had off from school, I would be outside from sunrise to sundown. I loved being outside, just going hiking and walking through the woods and, being out with my dogs and just enjoying nature. So my dad had a lot of, ponds, and we'd go fishing and just have a blast outside. So yeah, there was nothing really indoor that seemed like more fun to me as a child, as being outside.
Well, I think all the listeners will agree with you on that. The best thing is to be outside doing something, whether that's fishing, hunting, hiking, camping, whatever it is. And, I can remember when I was a little kid, same thing. I wanted to be outside. I would come up to my grandparents' farm and I would play outside. I'd play in the tree row, in the pasture, wherever, I'd be running around, getting into trouble, having a good time. So that's definitely a good thing. And, it's good for kids to be able to do that. And we need to really, try to allow our kids to do that. I know my kids are fortunate enough to live on a farm, so they get to go out and play all the time. And I think that's such a healthy thing for kids.
Yeah, it really is. I agree. Like, the more we can encourage kids to go outside and do outdoor activities and just, play outside. Kids are very creative. So it's like once they get out there, you always find something to do. Like, we would build stick forts and, just explore outside in the woods. And it was really fun, and it's easy for kids to kind of get stuck inside and sitting in front of the TV. So once they get outside, that push to just get them out, they really do enjoy it. So yeah, it's definitely a healthy thing.
Yeah, it's better for their brain and better for their bodies. So I think shooting sports is kind of a cool way for kids to do that. So like, with 4-H and these other activities, kids can get involved in archery, be outside shooting, or they can, start doing air rifles and 22s, those kind of things. So I do want to kind of move that direction. So for kids, I'm a dad, David's a dad. What advice would you give to moms and dads out there that are listening on how to get their kids started in shooting sports? Like, what's the right age? What's the right level to kind of start that process?
Right. So I get asked this question quite often. 6, 7 is for a rifle, like a 22 or even like a BB gun and gun safety, making sure that they know how to handle the firearm properly, and always encourage them, even like with toy guns, because it's like our kids grow up with toy guns and it's like shoot and bang, bang. So it's good to kind of instill in them, even from an early age before they're handling real firearms, like guns are a weapon. So, don't point at anything that you don't want to shoot. Same goes for like toy rifles that can still throw a projectile out. I think it's good to start kids at a young age. Better to have them know proper gun safety than, be at a friend's house and not know. So a lot of times I know moms are generally concerned, that it's a dangerous tool, but if you are teaching your child the proper safety that goes along with that tool, kids generally do very well in paying attention and learning how to handle that properly. So
yeah, I always talk to my kids about, having positive control of your firearm, having good control of it, and then also making sure it's pointed in a safe direction. Those are kind of the big things. And like you said, if you're not intending to shoot something, don't point the muzzle of the gun at it. It's just like that with a Nerf gun or anything else. The other thing that I've noticed in the industry is that you have it's kind of harder for women, unfortunately. Like if a young lady wants to come in and do shooting, there's almost like a stigma or like, oh, I don't know if you should shoot that 12 gauge, or I don't know if you should shoot that 270 or 30-06. It's almost like people are like, well, I don't know if that girl can handle it. Can you talk about some of those stigmas and barriers and things that you've seen coming into the industry and then had to overcome?
Yeah, definitely. Be happy to. There is definitely a stigma, I feel, and it depends on, it's like with anything. You can walk into one particular gun store and not have any issues, and you can walk into another gun store as a female and kind of feel, like they're not too sure about the firearm that you're interested in, if you should even be interested in that firearm. A lot of times, you kind of get labeled as, oh, it's a female, here's a 22, even if you have the experience with higher caliber firearms. So generally I tell women just, never be afraid to start the process, number one, because everyone has to start somewhere. So if you're a beginner and you don't know much about firearms, don't hesitate to, educate yourself, take a beginner course, because something like a beginner course, everyone in the class is going to be a beginner. And that's what the instructors are going to be expecting. And when it comes to shopping around for a firearm, whether you're a first-time buyer or not, you can read online. I did a lot of reading before I purchased my first firearm, just because I wanted to get some kind of an idea of what would be the right fit for me for, the use that I wanted it for, what caliber would be best for my weight, my size, what would I feel most comfortable with starting out. So that gave me a little bit of knowledge going forward into the buying process for my first firearm. So that helped out a little bit. Never be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah. So tell me about your first experience buying a firearm. What was that like?
So my first firearm I got at a gun show, actually. And I was a first-time buyer. I knew that I wanted something that was, a good caliber to start out with. So I figured on a 22. I wanted something to start just for practice and to get comfortable with. So I got a Mossberg 22. It was a semi-automatic rifle. And I started practice with that. I got really good. I got comfortable with it, safety. And, then I started at something like 25 yards. And then I kept moving the target further and further and got more comfortable with it that way. So it really just takes time and practice. And once I felt comfortable with that, I felt like I was ready to move on to something else. And also concealed carry. I was interested in that as well.
That's cool to always hear how people start. I remember my start was with a little BB gun. It's kind of like Ralphie and the Christmas Story, the little BB gun and going out and, shooting pop cans and then, little paper targets and those kind of things, and then just kind of worked my way up. But I think everybody who's used a firearm kind of has a story like that, where they started with either an air rifle or a 22 or maybe even a 20 gauge or a 410, something like that, and got their start. But it's kind of interesting when you start with one, then you're like, well, I wonder what the other ones are like. And so then you start kind of that progression. What was that like for you?
That was a rifle that I had. So I wanted to purchase, other types of firearms. So I wanted a handgun. And again, with that, I did a lot of reading because I wanted it for concealed carry. So I did a lot of reading about what would be a good caliber to start for concealed carry. I went with a 380. It was the actual handgun's probably about the size of my hand, and I have small hands. And it was easy to conceal. It took kind of some getting used to just because there were it's such a small handgun that the recoil, even though it was a 380, it felt kind of like it was going to flip out of your hands if you didn't keep a good grip on it. But it was nothing too crazy. And I got used to it and very comfortable with that as well. So then from there, I moved up to a 9mm. And I just kind of would alternate depending on the day, what clothing I was wearing or how I was going to carry. I would alternate between the two. I eventually got some revolvers too. I love revolvers, even though, you don't really carry those. I don't, but I just enjoy having them. So, and then I got an AR-15 and an AK-47 and a 308. So I kind of ventured up into the other caliber. Like you said, once you start shooting one, you're kind of like, I wonder what that next one is like. So, yeah.
And so what's the largest caliber you've fired so far?
That I fired, I don't own it, but I fired a 50 caliber, and that was a lot of fun. So, yeah, that was definitely a blast to shoot. It was quite the experience.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've already outdone me. I've never shot a 50 cal, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I would recommend it if you ever get the chance, just for the experience. The recoil wasn't bad, but it was definitely a lot of fun to shoot.
Yeah, I was at an Air Force base this last year doing a tour, and they had different equipment pulled out, and one of the trailers that they had a whole bunch of different types of rifles. Well, then they had the 50 caliber pulled out, and then you could lay on the ground and look through the scope like you would if you were going to actually use it. And it was really cool. I was like, man, I wish we could shoot this. And the guy's like, yeah, we'd like to let you shoot it, but we can't. I was like, darn it, I really want to do that. So one of these days I'll have to shoot the 50 cal.
Yeah, definitely. I think you'd love it for sure.
Yeah, it can reach way out there, so that's pretty cool. But real quick, I'm going to talk about another one of our sponsors, which is PK Lures. We're really grateful for their sponsorship of the podcast. It is ice fishing season most places still in the country. So if you haven't tried PK Lures and their jigging spoons, get out there and try those. Our last episode was with Tim Jenny. He's a freshwater fishing Hall of Famer and had the world record walleye there for a little while. So you'll have to go back and listen to that. If you're chasing after walleye, there's some great tips on there for catching trout and other things as well. But go to pklure.com. You can pick up your own PK spoons, PK flutterfish, any of their other baits. And if you use PK Pro at checkout, you get 15% off. So I did want to ask you about this too. There's a trend in hunting and in shooting where there are more women involved, especially since COVID. So can you talk a little bit about why that might be and just kind of your perspective on it?
I think it may be a couple different things. I think for the first time in a long time, people were kind of getting back to the outdoors and getting back to, activities that they didn't typically have time for. And during COVID, a lot of the safest things was to be doing something with other people outside. So I think that could have contributed. And also we saw a lot of new first-time gun owners in the United States as well. So I think a combination of the two.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot more people. I know here in Wyoming, we had just an explosion in tourism, way more people putting in for hunting tags, a lot more people on the water fishing, and then, of course, a lot more people picking up shooting sports. I was at our local retailer that handles most of the firearms for the community, and they were selling out of everything. I mean, it was just crazy, the kind of demand that they had, and people were, they just wanted to get outside and do something. So they're like, you know what? Maybe I haven't shot in a long time, or maybe I want to get into shooting. And so they'd come in and they'd make their order and they get what they need and then they go. And I think it's, it kind of goes back to what we talked about with kids. It's really good for adults as well to be outside and to go experience those things. But what do you think are some of the implications with that? Because it's great when people are interested, but it's also great when they go and they get educated on how to use them properly. And I wonder, what other kind of implications are there with more people being out doing those kind of things?
I think, it's good that people are wanting to be outside and getting into firearms. And one reason that is so that they can get the proper training, those activities safely, and feel comfortable with their firearm. So some first-time gun owners, they feel a little hesitant, like they don't want to take a class because they don't want to look silly if they're not, well educated on how to properly use it. And that's what the classes are for. So the more that you practice, the more comfortable that you feel. The more you practice and the better you become with it.
I've noticed there's a lot more places offering classes, of this is how you do it, whether it be, NRA pistol certifications or whatever. There's a lot of different options out there so that you can do that. One of the best options, in my opinion, is like hunter safety. That's a big thing here in Wyoming is, just basic firearm safety is hunter safety. And so if any of you are listening to this and you haven't done hunter safety yet, that's a great first step. And then I think another great step is like I took all the NRA pistol certifications, and that was a really great set of courses for me because I didn't understand all the differences. I didn't understand all the intricacies, and it taught me about not just the safety aspect, which was a huge part of it, but also what's going to fit me the best. And I spent a lot of time on the range trying different types of handguns. You talked about revolvers and pistols. It's like, well, there's single action, there's double action, there's all these different things that you don't really think about, and they all have a different application. And so it was kind of cool to take those courses and get that knowledge and start using those. So one of the things I always come back to is, we do have the ability to go out and do shooting recreation. We have that ability. It's part of the Second Amendment. It's a right that we've had. And why is it so important from your perspective? Why does that one matter to you? I mean, I have my own spiel, but why is it important to you?
The Second Amendment, I feel, is really the backbone of the United States Constitution. So the Second Amendment really protects the First. Without the Second Amendment, the way that our founding fathers set it up was there. So if in any event there was government that became tyrannical, we would have that Second Amendment to defend ourselves and our freedom and our families. So I'm very passionate about that. There's definitely this move in the United States that is making steps towards infringing on the Second Amendment. So I think a big problem when it comes to that is just lack of knowledge when it comes to firearms. I hear a lot of, talk about like AR-15s and assault rifles. And, a lot of people don't even know that AR doesn't stand for assault rifle. It stands for Armalite rifle, which is just a makeup. And it's really just a semi-automatic rifle. You pull the trigger, one bullet comes out. It's just like, a lot of handguns. Same thing with a 9mm handgun. You pull the trigger, one bullet comes out. A lot of people think that they're the full auto where you pull the trigger and just a spray of bullets come out. And part of the problem has been people in the media, talking about it in that way. And it's just a misrepresentation. They don't do their homework and they don't really know the functionality of the AR-15. So
yeah, the Armalite rifle, it's always been kind of comical to me to see politicians say, well, AR is assault rifle. It's like, no, it's actually a brand. There's lots of different makes and models of, the assault rifle, I guess, if you want to put that in air quotes, but it's a tool and yeah, I mean, I've shot ARs. It's, we have a really cool opportunity here. I've been able to go out and do some range time with some of our local police officers, and they're a great tool. And like you said, you don't pull the trigger and have like 60 bullets flying. You pull the trigger and one bullet comes out. So it's a semi-automatic, and just dispelling some of those things is kind of difficult, just because I think in hunting and in shooting in general, it's been demonized now for quite a while. I was telling some people, like, if you look at just even kids movies, back to Bambi and, the Fox and the Hound, some of those, it's like, they make the hunter just look like a horrible, crazed person who's just out there trying to shoot everything. And that's not what we are at all. Just like in shooting sports, same thing, we're not just out there flinging bullets and just seeing what'll happen. And so I don't know how we go about changing that other than being good ambassadors for the sport and having those good conversations. And I had one of those the other day about the North American conservation model and why that's important for preserving wildlife. So what are some tips, in your opinion, if you're going to have a conversation with maybe that family member, that friend that's just dead set against guns? They say, oh, well, guns are the reasons for all the problems. What do you say to that?
I think, people have this idea that if we just ban a certain kind of gun, that we're going to, reduce a lot of gun violence in the United States. And the big push is in the government wanting to ban AR-15s is the idea that, that will stop mass shootings from happening. And that's not really the case. Mass shootings still happen in countries that have banned guns of all kinds, not just semi-auto and full auto, but all guns. They still happen. And we often see when we look at statistics in other countries that crime rates actually start to go up because now criminals who, don't obey gun laws and still obtain guns now still have those weapons, and they know that the law-abiding citizen is disarmed. So when you look at things like that, and when you look at, even in the United States, self-defense with a gun is used a lot to save lives. And you don't really hear about that on the news because, it's they don't really consider that newsworthy. But when you look at the stats just overall for violence, typically even the cities in the United States that have the strictest gun laws have the highest rates of gun crime. So gun laws and gun restrictions don't really reduce gun crime. So, and really you would be infringing on the rights of United States citizens while also not really reducing crime. So it's hard to really make that argument when you look at the facts as to would it really be beneficial for us to ban guns or certain kinds of guns. If it would, I think for myself, okay, I would be on board with that. But when you look at it, it's just not the case. So, and like I said, it's really the backbone of the United States Constitution. So,
oh, there's David. Hey, he made it on. How you doing?
And for a little bit, just listening. I didn't want to interrupt.
No,
So
you're good, man.
I've got 2 cents. Welcome. We're here at the trade show. If you can see me. Yeah, it's busy, so it's been crazy. Rebecca, nice to meet you. Pretty quickly, my thought went to add to this 2 cents is anytime the government puts in a price ceiling or a price floor by creating a law, you create a black market, A, right? But B, the restrictions on guns is, I mean, we could go round and round and argue about it forever. However, simply put, reducing magazines or putting a limit on the Second Amendment, like you said, just harms the first, right?
right. Yep, agree, definitely.
And you look at the FBI statistics, and the other side to play devil's advocate, they argue, well, you want to save lives, right? You don't want to have people killed. The most violent weapon is a baseball bat. You don't see us putting restrictions or serializing or putting age restrictions on baseball bats. But furthermore, I'll go all the way to drunk driving accidents. That is 100% curable today. There's 54,000 people a year killed on our roads by somebody who got behind the wheel who shouldn't have, right? The thought that we're going to pass this law, we're going to have a magazine restriction, we're going to have a caliber restriction, and all of a sudden we're going to have a safer society, it's actually counterintuitive. If you want to have a safer society, look at Sweden. Everybody's trained, everybody's deployed in the army, everybody goes home with their weapon, is trained to secure, is a standing army ready to go, right? And the crime is non-existent. It's rural America versus populated America. Come on, Chicago is one of the strictest gun-controlled cities in the nation. And there's 50 murders every weekend there with pistols. And criminals don't abide by gun laws. This is a little more political than we normally get, which is fine. I like it. Right? It's pretty straightforward. The Second Amendment wasn't written because the deer were coming.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter how many rounds my weapon holds. A tyrannical government is a tyrannical government, and they will step on the throats of the citizens until they get what they want. And the founding fathers were wise enough to see that, had seen where we came from, and said, no, we're not. We're going to set up a system here. And you can ask historians, why didn't Japan ever invade mainland USA during World War II? I don't remember which general it was that had studied in California, but he said there would be a rifle behind every blade of grass. You would not win that war.
Yep, that's right. That's right. And 1.6 million self-defense cases in the United States with a law-abiding citizen defending themselves. So that's 1.6 million, generally speaking, citizens in the United States who are using a firearm for self-protection every year it goes unheard of. So, it doesn't make the news, but the fact that citizens have a weapon to protect themselves is saving lives every day. So, and you're right, to take firearms away from law-abiding citizens, it just creates more crime.
Yeah, 100%. It's a heart problem, right? It's all the way down to somebody out there today is planning on harming another person. If they want to do it, age, weapon, caliber restrictions aren't going to stop them, right?
Yep.
So the only thing that makes a 115-pound petite blonde little girl equal with a 350-pound man is a pistol in her hand. They're now on equal ground, and she gets to defend herself. Otherwise, it's back to mob tribalism and the strong devour the weak, period.
Right. It's like the saying, teach your daughters to shoot because a restraining order is just a piece of paper. So, yeah.
To translate this over to hunting, I mean, what was, what's a firearm for in the hunting world? It's a tool, just like it's a tool to defend yourself, so you can kind of translate those things over, in hunting. It's so important to have a good rifle and to be able to make a lethal, ethical kill on, a deer, an elk, whatever it is that you're hunting. And that's part of our heritage. That's part of the fabric of the people in this country. I was talking about it at dinner the other night with our tribal game and fish game warden. He's the same way. You know, he's like, man, if we didn't have hunting, if we didn't have fishing, if we didn't have trapping, like my heritage is gone, right? Like, because it's such an important piece to so many people. And I know for David and myself and for you that it is a big thing. And we are a small portion of the United States as far as, you know, people who do that for their recreation. You know, if you look at, you know, nationwide, we're a very small percentage. And that's why it's so important to tell our story and to tell it well and to be able to articulate exactly why it's important to be able to have firearms for not just self-defense, but for hunting, for recreation. There's a whole lot of applications for that. So I don't know, what are some other thoughts that you have maybe on firearms and why it's so important?
Well, I think, like you said, it extends into a lot of aspects of life. So not only is it important to, you know, the freedom that we deem so valuable in the United States, but also when it comes to recreational sports, for a lot of people, you know, if they aren't in, you know, and enjoying hobbies like that, like long range or 3-gun or just target practice with their kids or, you know, 4-H, they don't really understand how popular it is among citizens who enjoy those activities. So I think it is a big part of our culture, and I think that it's important for us to educate people who don't understand that on the importance of it, you know, why we enjoy those activities, why it's important to us, and also why the Second Amendment is important to us also when it comes to the Constitution and our freedoms in the United States. So I think it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize, like, if you were born in a big city and you've never been around firearms and the only experience you've had with it is seeing the news where somebody got shot, I mean, of course you're going to be like, man, I don't know what to think about that. But if you're in rural America, you have a totally different viewpoint. So I can understand why there's a disparity between the two, right, David?
The big disparity is, well, the Second Amendment is outdated. It was written so long ago. That was when we had flintlock muskets, and now we have these fire-repeating arms, right? Well, very, very blatantly, the Gatling gun was invented, oh, don't quote me, like 2 or 3 years before the Constitution was written, right? The patent for the first Gatling gun. So multi-fire, multi-barrel weapon. Founding fathers knew what was coming. They knew technology would advance. This isn't an outdated old law that needs revamp, right? This is the cornerstone of the civilized society that we live in. And I guarantee you, we cannot pull out the foundation of our country and have it continue to stand.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, if you talk about the way that technology has changed, I mean, I don't see David flying around in an F-22 Raptor either. So, I mean, it's not like, you know, our handguns and our AR-15s are going to do us a lot of good against the F-22. But just to put that out there, I mean, things have changed, but like what we're talking about is self-defense and hunting and those kind of things that we as citizens really need to have the ability to do. We need to have the ability to protect our homes, protect our families. Those things are important, and we shouldn't take them lightly because they can go away. And we've seen societies where it has, and seen the effects of what has happened in societies who've lost that right.
And I point out to people a lot of times, like what's going on in Ukraine right now, because Ukrainians, they weren't allowed to have firearms, and then they were invaded by Russia. And we all saw the devastation that created. And, you know, the United States started sending firearms over to the Ukrainians so that they would have something to defend themselves with. And now you're sending them, you know, an AR-15 style rifle, and they have no basic training. They've had no time to take courses and learn, you know, proper safety and how to use it. So a lot of times it's best to have it and be prepared and, you know, hope for the best and still have it. Worst case scenario, if you ever need it, at least you know how to use it. So yeah,
it kind of goes back to what David was saying earlier. You know, there are countries that train their people on how to use them. They have to do a little bit of military, and then you have the complete opposite of that where citizens don't know how to use them at all. And I mean, that would be a situation I wouldn't want to be in personally. I do want to ask you this. What do you see as maybe the biggest threat to, the outdoor industry, what I like to call the outdoor way of life with, hunting, fishing, and shooting sports?
I do. Shooting sports would just be because I think a lot of semi-automatic firearms that pertains to everything, even handguns, and that would, flood over into hunting as well. So now, a lot of people who use an AR-15 to hunt with, and it's different. Each state has different laws, but in states where you can use an AR-15 to hunt with, now you can no longer use it. Like I said, it would impact handguns as well. I think another threat to fishing and hunting is just, I think in our society, there is a shift into thinking that, hunting is bad. Like you mentioned, even in movies like Bambi, where they make the hunter out to look like this crazed killer, that'll just shoot at anything and everything. Where in reality, a lot of times, hunters just really enjoy the outdoors. They really respect nature, and it's part of conservation also. So the benefits of hunting and fishing, we need to keep that going in our society and not have this push that hunting is bad and, firearm sports are bad, because they offer a lot of positive things to our society.
Again, like I said, I was talking about the North American conservation model with some folks and sharing how that is the reason for all of the wildlife that we have in Wyoming. That is the reason for having awesome game and fish and game departments. We couldn't do it without it. And David talks a lot about this too. It's so critical. And I think one of the big risks that we run, especially right now, is, like you said, it only takes little changes, but those little changes can add up. So if they say, I know in Canada, they were talking about taking away semi-automatic, rifles. Well, that's some, that's a term, and you can apply that. Like you said, that could be an AR-15, that could be, your pistol that you use for self-defense. Well, then what's next after that? Then is it any kind of rifle or handgun that carries more than one round? So then now you're down to single shots, what does that end up looking like? And so it becomes kind of a domino effect if you don't watch it and if you're not careful.
Yeah, it really does. So I think that just kind of educating people who aren't knowledgeable about firearms and the differences, because like I said, a lot of people still think, and it's pushed by the media oftentimes that, AR-15s are fully automatic when they're not. They're semi-automatic. That a 30-round capacity magazine, should be banned. Nobody needs 30 rounds for hunting. Well, like we said earlier, the Second Amendment isn't about hunting. It's about being able to protect yourself from a tyrannical government if you ever needed to. And I don't think like an AR-15 is a lot to ask for, like you said, when they have F-22s and, the government is much more advanced than anything that we have. So
what are your thoughts on this, David?
I've had quite a few as we've been sitting here listening about how hunting and the portrayal of us in the media is, right? We're less than 5% of the population. There's 5% that are anti-hunting. There's 5% that are pro. Everybody's in the middle, right? There's a lot of people that, my dad hunted, or my brother, or my grandpa. Our image is important, right? What you say and what you portray online and how the reality of it is important. How we communicate why we're so passionate about what we do. Patrick and I try very hard to portray a good message, right? But it's more important that we need to come together and start standing up for each other's rights. And there's a saying, and I'll misquote it, but basically the government came for all the guys with pitchforks, and I didn't have a pitchfork, so I didn't say anything. And then the government came for everybody with axes, and I didn't have an axe, so I didn't say anything. But now the government's coming for me with my torch, and there's no one left to help defend me, right? So just because you're not an AR guy, or just because you're not a 3-gun guy, or just because you're not a pistol guy for home defense, or you're not a duck hunter, or you're not a big game long range guy, right? Really doesn't matter. Comes down to the fact that we're in a debate whether we should have guns in this country at all or not. And you look at history, you look at Russia, you look at the Gulag, right? Gulag, the term Jordan Peterson loves to hammer this point. They were the farmers. They were the rural workers. They were the doers. And the government villainized them and victimized that class and said, they're stealing your food. They're the reason that there's a famine. We don't need any more farmers in this country. And they threw them all in jail and prison and killed them. And in a generation, Russia went from, free speech, free country to the worst socialist country that was around for a while, and, huge famines, and everybody died. So, we sit here and hammer this, and, they want to call us names and vilify us and say that we're uneducated or not intelligent, right? Long term, we all need to band together and start supporting one another in all our outdoor activities, whether that's fishing, hunting, recreating in any kind, because they're going after the trappers really hard. They're going after the predator hunters really hard. You can get a 200-round magazine for a firearm, but the military is walking around with fully automatic weapons. An AR, like you mentioned before, armor light rifle, was a civilian model of what they had in the military. And if you go back through history, civilians have always coveted what they had in battle as a personal weapon, right? That's going to be continuing for the foreseeable future. But I see that a threat is, I don't use the black gun, so they're bad. Well, I don't use long range hunting, so it's bad. I'm a bow hunter, and we need to prop bow hunting up, and we need to tear down long range hunting because it's bad. We need to come together as sportsmen and sportswomen and support each other.
Yeah, well said. I agree.
So here's the next part of this. We're going to shift gears a whole bunch, and I want to hear, you had mentioned that you were interested, like if you could hunt any big game animal. You had mentioned bison, so tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think if I had the opportunity to hunt for any game, it would definitely be a bison. I don't know if I'll ever get the opportunity, but if it ever arises, I'd love to go out west. I'm an East Coast girl, and we don't have any out my way, but I would love to go out west and hunt for one day. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, so if you were going to do that, what caliber would you want to use?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I would probably be shopping for a new rifle altogether.
Yeah.
So my research, find something new, I'm sure.
Coming from the guide world and a lot of people coming on guided hunts, they always go, I'm going to shop for a new rifle. 100%. Do your research, pick a caliber that's suitable, but make sure when you show up that you can, A, handle the weapon, and B, you're accurate with it. And my example would be, I've seen plenty of elk fall to a 243, but guys leave their favorite deer rifle at home in favor of a new 300 Magnum Super whatever. They show up and they cannot handle the weapon. They have not practiced with the weapon. I've been much happier if they would have showed up with the old reliable 270-06 and been able to manage it. So my 2 cents is pick whichever you think is suitable. Make sure it's at least bare minimum legal, but be effective and accurate with whatever you bring.
Right.
And when you do that, you can put in, Wyoming has tags. So, you could come out our way and try to hunt a bison out here. Those will be, you can put in for those here pretty quick. And then, once you do harvest that bison, talk about another one of our sponsors is High Mountain. They make a lot of great seasonings that you can put on that bison, or if you're going elk hunting, or if you're going deer hunting, antelope hunting, whatever it is, to help make that meat really good. They have everything from jerky kits, sausage kits. They have seasoning for steaks. And then, maybe if you're just wanting to have burger, or hey, maybe Rebecca, you would have a bison burger. They have some great burger seasoning that everybody can get. You can buy it from their website. They have great stuff for fish. So you can go to High Mountain Jerky's website. It's HIMTNjerky.com and pick up a kit and try it out. I mean, it's wonderful stuff. So hopefully, you can put in, get a bison tag and come out here and get a bison and then get a whole bunch of High Mountain seasonings, take it home and enjoy it.
Oh, that sounds great. That would be awesome.
So as far as wild game goes, or fish or whatever it is that you like to eat, what's your favorite kind of natural protein that you like to have, and what's one way that you prepare it?
Fish, I like crappie, and generally I pan fry it. I usually mix a batter instead of like the breadcrumbs. I like the beer battered mix, and I eat a lot of venison. So in Pennsylvania, a lot of white-tailed deer, so I cook with that a lot also. But I love both.
Yeah, that sounds good. So shifting gears a little bit, what's next on the horizon for you? What are some things, that even just closing thoughts for us on the podcast? What are some things that you want to leave people with?
Mainly, I would say for beginners that are new into the gun world, who want to start, is not to be scared. Everyone starts somewhere. You could find courses, like you said, with the NRA, or a lot of gun shops offer courses. You could get started and help yourself feel more comfortable. Do some reading online, but don't be fearful to start. And once you do, I think, people who are hesitant or are kind of self-doubting themselves when it comes to handling a firearm will find that, with the proper education and handling it safely, that they really, really enjoy it. It's a really fun thing to get into.
Yeah, that's great. And then, David, you might want to talk a little bit about Bow Spider. I mean, you've been on the road for quite a while. Where are you guys at right now?
We're at the NRA's Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg, PA. We've been here for 8 days living in this booth. I don't know if everybody can see the YouTube video or not, but we exist. We're here. It's a great show. I actually got to meet the CEO, president of the NRA. He was here shaking hands, kissing babies. It was good to meet him, good to talk. I mean, yeah. So next for us, we're headed to Portland, Oregon, do another show. We're here demoing, showing off the product. We have the new crossbow model coming, and that's exciting. And then, here pretty soon we have something really, really exciting coming. Give me 6 months. I'm always working on something, Patrick. You know that.
Yeah, I do. That's great. And if you're interested in Bow Spider, go to bowspider.com and pick up your Bow Spider. They'll get one shipped out to you right away. So, Rebecca, I just want to say a big thank you for coming on to the podcast with us. It's been fun to talk about firearms and talk about women in firearms specifically. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed being here with you today. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Radcast Outdoors podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed the show. If so, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast and subscribe, share, and give us a 5-star rating, which really helps other people find the show. You can find all of our shows, recipes, giveaways, videos, and much more at radcastoutdoors.com. While you're there, please help support the show by purchasing a Radcast Outdoors shirt or hat. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a Radcast community on Facebook called Radcast Nation, and we'd love for you to join in the conversation there. And of course, please help support our sponsors who make this show possible. Thank you again to PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings. Until next time, get out there and enjoy the outdoors.